afternoon to all. It's pleasure to invite you all for our second day FBP. And here I invite now our department head, Dr. Rama, to propose an invitation to our guest, Dr. Jyoti John Pandit.
Thank you, Kavita. Am I audible?
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
audible?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon to the attendees of the 5-day online international faculty development program. The Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram campus, welcomes you to day 2 of the series of enlightening lectures. And today is day 2. Day 1 commenced with an interesting talk by Dr. Sangeeta Mukherjee of VIT on language, culture, and society. Today we have amidst us Dr. Joji John Panikar, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of English, CMS College, Kottayam, Kerala. He will deliberate on the topic cultured bodies, human body as a site of social interpretation. We are indeed going to be witness to a very interesting talk today from the cultural angle. And you all know that culture has always fascinated us. So I take this opportunity to welcome our resource person, Dr. Joji John Panikar, a versatile person who dons many hats. Hearty welcome, sir. Thank you for your kind acceptance. It's an honor for us. Thank you and welcome, sir. And may I, at this juncture, invite my colleague Sylvia to present the introductory remarks.
Thank you, ma'am. Good noon to all. I take great pleasure to introduce the speaker of the day, Dr. Joji John Panikar. Dr. Joji John Panikar is an Indian poet, editor, and critic in English. He is an assistant professor in the PG and Research Department of English and also the director, Center for Research in English, CMS Kottayam, Kerala. He was awarded PhD on the thesis, A Critique of the Psycho-Sexual Dimensions in Selected Plays of Mahesh Dattani, A Queer Approach, from Gandhigram Road University, Tamil Nadu. He is the Director, Internal Quality Assurance Cell and Senate member of Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. He is currently the Joint Secretary of the Guild of Indian English Writers, Editors and Critics. He is an Associate Editor of the Refereed International Biannual Journal, Writers, Editors, Critics. He is a member of the editorial board of Literary Oracle and International Journal of Literature and Culture. Also, he is a member of the editorial boards of various journals in India and abroad. He has presented papers and poetry in several international as well as national conferences and literary festivals. His poems feature in several anthologies. Very happy to welcome such a versatile personality to enlighten us on literature. May I now invite Dr. Joji John Panikar to take over the session.
Thank you very much for your words of introduction and welcome. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible? Okay, respected Dr. Rama, ma'am, head of the department and convener of this 5-day FDP on language and literature, tools to understand society and culture. Faculty coordinators, Dr. T. Sri Devi, my dear friends Kavita and Sylvia, the faculty members of Srm-Ist, and all the participants of this 5-day faculty development program. A warm good afternoon to everyone. I'm indeed glad to be a part of this enlightening 5-day international faculty development program organized by the SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram campus. I've been a regular listener in the faculty development programs organized by this department in the past few months. In fact, it is really encouraging to discuss various aspects of language and literature. And these discourses will actually help the academic community to have a much more better, broader idea about the things which are being discussed in this program. As I said, this FDP on language and literature, which is titled Tools to Understand Society and Culture, thinking on the different aspects of culture. As I was listening to yesterday's session, a broad outline of the language, culture, and the culture studies was presented in the talk yesterday. And this is a continuum. And today I am planning to discuss about the cultured bodies, the human body as a site of social construction or social representations. That is the point which I am planning to discuss today. See, when we consider human body as a cultural object, we might initially think this to be an absurd concept. After all our bodies are most decidedly, as we know, a part of nature, which is subject to natural processes such as growth and decay, hunger and illness, and so on and so forth. Of all of which daily reminds us of our connection to retain outside the culture and society. While the human body consists of an indisputable natural substratum, cultural studies takes seriously the notion its appearance, condition, and activity are culturally shaped. We have come across these factors in various literary works, in various films, and we talk about the tastes, desires, about the ways of moving and talking, the concerns, the gestures, the thoughts and feelings. All these things are being discussed in the literary works and the films. Just as the human body has become a compelling focus of popular concern in contemporary society, as it is witnessed by the mass media's preoccupations these days with sex, sports, stars, and diet. Likewise, cultural studies come to take increasing interest in the body as a key site for the playing out of the social and cultural difference. Among several other reasons for the upsurge of this academic interest in the body, we can we can we can specifically address a person, Michel Foucault, and the movement of feminism and the growth of consumer culture. These are some of the key reasons for the upsurge of this academic interest in the body. Foucault drew attention to the practices, discourses, and technologies through which power is imprinted or inscribed on the human body. A common argument in most of the feminist thought process is that women's embodied experience is a significant but often overlooked statement or starting point for our analysis. And in the later stage, finally, the growth of the consumer culture, especially since the end of the Second World War, has accelerated the commodification of the human body, creating ever more finely graded status hierarchy based around the costuming and display of embodied differences. I would like to specifically address 5 broad aspects of the cultural shaping of human bodies in this session. The first key aspect that I would like to address is the social construction of the human body. Amongst the five broad aspects of the cultural shaping of the human bodies, this is where we start off our discussion with the social construction of the human body or human corporeality. See, discussions of the human body in cultural studies often refer to the related terms mind and self. We need to understand the difference between mind and self. We start off our discussion about the body or human body or material human body from the evolutionary biology. And it is now widely accepted that the Homo sapiens emerged from a process of evolution. And the precise point when recognizably modern humans appeared is still a matter of dispute among specialists. Although it does seem that they were present in Europe by 35,000 years ago, at least we could find at least five specific features of the bodies of human distinguish humans as species, a separate species. Five specific features of the bodies of humans. The first one is the capacity for a binocular vision. If we look at a human being, certain aspects of how we interact with the world arise from the human's capacity for vision. Most social encounters begin with an assessment, even if it is for a very brief period. It starts with the assessment of the appearance of the other. Consequently, there might be differences in the case of blind persons who experience very obvious handicaps in their interaction with the others. But most generally, vision serves as the coordinator of the senses, and awareness of our body in its own right is crucial to the vision, to our capacity to scan or to view, and thus monitor many areas of our own bodies and the person or the other. The second specific feature of the bodies of humans is the audio-vocalic system. The throat, the mouth, and the ears are coordinated with the brain and the central nervous system so as to enable us to speak. The use of language is our fundamental symbolic capacity, This is one specific feature of humans as a species. Other major feature is bipedalism. We walk upright. Even in the automobile-dominated culture today, walking remains the basic way of moving around in our world. And bipedalism enhances the way that our vision works. Fourth major feature is hands. The fingers and the opposing thumb of the human hand permit the manipulation of objects in a precise and very careful manner. Tool use involves complex bodily coordination, which is focused around the skilled use of the hand. The physical environment is more malleable to the will of the humans as tool-using creatures. We use our hands and the machineries or the tools using these hands. This capacity is thought to have contributed to the development of sociality by providing a basis for cooperation arising from the need to coordinate tool-using activities. We work together using these hands. Yet another specific feature of the bodies of humans is expressive capacity. Humans have a capacity for greater gestural complexity than other primates. The faces of humans, for example, can express a wide range of emotions, and some embodied gestures, notably, laughter is one notable feature, appear to be unique to human beings. So these specific features frame the kinds of activity in which humans can engage, They are species specific capacities that all healthy adult human can mobilize irrespective of time and place. Cultural studies emphasizes that the body is not merely a material entity, biological datum, or physiological fact, but it is in a real and significant sense a social construction. That is the key point which I would like to stress. And as I said, mind is the capacity for reason, thought, and reflection carried out by the brain but not reducible to it. As we remember Descartes' famous dictum, I think, therefore I am, is a radical split between body and mind has been widely accepted, even when Descartes says this. The mind is regarded as dwelling in a human body but remains somehow distinct from it. The mind body split is often linked to a number of further contrasts. The mind is private, whereas the body is public. The mind is inner, whereas the body is the outer layer. The mind has this culture, but body has the nature. The mind has reason, and body has passion. See, there are things which are actually controversial when we discuss the relationship between mind and body continuum. There is this dualism which is misleading, pushing mind and body too far apart. Body and mind are better thought of as interdependent, not as separate entities. People's competence in making sense of talk and human expressions is an embodied and deeply cultural capacity. Except in the case of see, when we look at the constructionism, I would like to stress on the word constructionism, contradictory to the concept of essentialism. Constructionism, it is important to understand that the human body straddles the realms of nature and culture. The functioning of the material body must obey natural processes. We all have to sleep and eat, for example, but how sleeping, eating, and any other bodily activity actually occurs inescapably framed by social and cultural factors. As I said before, except for the transsexuals, the assignment of male and female is a categorization that is exhaustive of the population and lifelong in duration. The engendering bodies, the attribution of culturally conventional correlates of sex to produce the qualities recognized as masculinity or femininity begins almost immediately as what arrives in the world as a dimorphically classifiable organism is rapidly transformed into such eminently social constructions right from the childhood, when we are described as a little boy or a little girl. Age is in many societies no less significant. At every stage of the life course, there are expected forms of behavior and culturally defined and approved experiences. We have this canonical idea from Shakespeare, the notion of 7 ages of man. And gender, usually in tandem with the age, provides two of the deepest determinants of the cultural shaping of the human body. There is always this parallel distinction between the body as an object and as an as a subject. And many of the differences between men and women in the performance of tasks, such as lifting or carrying heavy things, are not due to simple strength variations. Women are often compared with the men. Women are said to have said to lack ready technique and easeful engagement with physical tasks, which comes quite readily to many men. Women will often lift things up in their arms and shoulders rather than also bringing power to their legs to the task. But the origins of these characteristic features of the feminine and movements of the female, they derive from women's situation in a sexist patriarchal society. In such a society, women are physically handicapped. When I say that, I don't mean to hurt the feelings of women, but that is a social construct. As lived bodies, we are open and unambiguous transcendences which are out to master a world that belongs to us, a world which is situated by our own intentions and our own projections. When we move on to the second aspect of the cultural shaping of human bodies, we come across the cultural understanding of the body. When we understand the body, we have certain capacities that are attributed to men and women, or the bodies of male and female. And these factors need to be discussed in detail. Bodies are actually sites in which social constructions of differences are mapped onto human beings. Subjecting the body to systemic regimes such as the regulations of the government is a method of ensuring that bodies will behave in socially and politically accepted manners. The body is placed in dichotomies, as I said, for example, masculine and feminine, able bodies, disabled bodies, heterosexual, homosexual, young, old. And these dichotomies illustrate that public-private borders are unstable. When we consider this, governments, for example, either choose to recognize the rights for minorities or justify discrimination and marginalization for minorities. The denial of constitutional rights of women seeking abortions, racial ethnic minorities, gay men, lesbians and transgendered people, or people with disabilities has demonstrated the unequal application. And there are several citizenship entitlements which are not available for bodies that transgress the cultural, social, sexual, and or political boundaries. And in the past, we have seen feminist scholars arguing that the body is both socially shaped and colonized by culture, and its established institutions. When we discuss about this, we come to the major point of our discussion, the cultured body. The politics of the body, different from the body politic, argues that the body itself is politically inscribed and is shaped by the practices of containment and control. We see Foucault arguing that the body is a central point for analyzing the shape of power in his power and knowledge discourse. And Marx contended that the body was marked with a person's economic class, which in turn affected his experiences. Issues ranging from population size to the gender formation and those that society has deemed deviant are inherently political. These issues define and shape the body. The cultivation of the body is actually essential here to determine how one will behave in a society. And Foucault's scholarship has guided feminist theorists to understand how the body has been historically disciplined, as well as the basis for many essentialist claims. Examining the body provides scholars with a mode of subjectivity that was previously misrepresented. Social conditioning and normalization incorrectly assume a stable nature of identity and power relations. However, this reduces individual agency and subjectivity. As active subjects, marginalized bodies can confound the dominant discourse by opposing prevailing ideologies that have marked the body with meaning. When we analyze the body as a site where power is contested and negotiated, it provides the academic fraternity or the scholars with the ability to examine the fluidity of privilege and marginalization. We need to address the concept of identity and space also in this context. As we think about body politics, boundaries, and space, there are many associations with identity, and identity is literally inseparable from difference. While in the spatial sciences, spatial differences are on the agenda, social differences are the object of uh, gender theorizing, or to be very specific, feminist theorizing. Why I'm using this feminist theorizing is because the body politics was essentially discussed in this feminist theorizing phase. And for both the construction of different spaces and embodied identities, the presence of the other is required. This is actually a very complicated concept. When there is an other, uh, what constitutes the other? I'm not going to discuss more deeply into the concept of the other. Besides, the notion of boundary arises inevitably, both as symbol encapsulating the line of social distinction and as a real borderline in space. And the relation of mutuality between embodied identities and spaces then leads us to an understanding of the identity and difference. Spatial as well as the social difference is more readily recognized as a discursive construction rather than a natural condition. And as a result of this, neither the human body nor space is a naturally given identity or a container. Instead, the bodies and spaces underlie very similar conditions of constitution and that they are mutually formatives. And bodies become a matter of fragility and difference, and they are no longer seen as organically formed, self-evident, autonomous material identities or internally homogeneous fields. Instead of being the interior truth of identity, the body is regarded as a rapidly shifting movement, as a performatively enacted signification. I stress the word performative. Issues of gender and sexual identity, explicitly rejecting ideas of natural, pre-given and fixed identities, and implicitly elaborating on the criticized mind-body dualism. Talking on a wider perspective, there has been a persistent but erratic and uncertain interest from symbolic interactionism in body, identity, self, and interaction. If we look at the presentation of self in everyday life by Irving Goffman, was demonstrated the importance of the body for identity and disruptions to interaction. When it is in the 1990s, the history of the body had become a major academic development in research on sexuality, culture, and the representation of the human body. When we consider cultural regulation of the human body, this is the third point which I would like to stress today. The first 2 points which I addressed were social construction of the human body. Second one was cultural understanding of the human body. And the third point which I would like to stress is cultural regulation of the human body. Culture as a controlling factor which regulates and produces restraint of the human bodies. Is one of the simplest ways to conceive of culture's impact on the body is to consider the early socialization, as I said, of infants and small children. When we say right in the childhood itself, a little boy or a little girl, this actually instills such basic skills such as the bodily movement of eating, elimination, and the expression of emotions. All these things are based on a regulation, which is given right from the socialization process given to the infants and very small children. But beyond this childhood socialization, there continues to be a very wide range of regulations and restraints on the bodies of persons. And some are set in law, others in custom and conventions. At this point, when we discuss the cultural regulation of the human body, there are two important analyses of culture's supervisory impact on the human body. As I mentioned the name of Foucault, Michel Foucault was one name and Norbert Elias was yet another name. We are very much familiar with Michel Foucault. People who are into the language and literature would be specifically familiar with Foucault and the power concept, the power discourse that Foucault has addressed. Foucault shows how bodies are disciplined by power operating through discourses that are institutionalized. In the modern society, there are bureaucratic organizations which Foucault discusses. There are hospitals, prisons, asylums, but also by more diffusively located forms. Example are the discourses about sexuality. You might have come across the history of sexuality by Foucault. And whereas Norbert Elias identifies a civilizing process, a long historical transformation that is marked by significant changes in manners and specifically how people regard their own and others' embodied actions. And the power discourse and the body which Foucault addresses, Foucault's singular intellectual project which explores the shifting and contested relations between power, knowledge, and the human body. It is generally accepted form to produce historically grounded analysis of the discourses that organize social arrangements and practices. When Foucault uses this term discourse, by discourse, Foucault intended it's not just simply a specialist language that described the world. He stressed that discourse was itself a part of the broader phenomenon of power. And Foucault draws contrast between the sovereign power that rulers exercised over their subjects in medieval times and its gradual replacement in the modern period by disciplinary power. And when we move on to a much more elaborate discussion, there is this panopticon, the inspection house concept, the punishment which Foucault addresses in Discipline and Punishment. I don't want to go deeper into those things. Foucault strongly opposed any simple theories of historical progress and emphasized instead on the discontinuity, complexity, and fragility of many historical changes. For him, power is dispersed in a society and works in capillary fashion through discourses. A good example of the positive and productive conception of power is Foucault's discussion of biopower. This refers to disciplinary power over life as it affects both individual bodies and social bodies, which means the entire population. And the sexual discourses are prime concerns for understanding the operation of biopower, for they connect both to conceptions of individuality and pleasure and to the management of populations in the shape of birth statistics, the contraceptive practices, STD, sexually transmitted diseases, longevity, and the community's general level of health. Whereas Elias, in civilizing the body, the civilizing process, Elias analyzes a long historical process through which people acquired an increasing capacity to control the expression of their emotions and other embodied acts. What is now considered as proper and civilized behavior is the outcome of a wide range of social processes which resulted in the redefinition of standards of propriety and in the direction of greater refinement and polishing. Accompanying these changes was the reconceptualization of the nature of human nature. Eating also becomes a disciplined or a civilized cultural practice when we consider the cultural regulation of the human body. The fourth point which I would like to address is the social representations of the human body or the human embodiment. How the human body is represented in everyday life, popular culture, and in the mass media. This is one major point which we need to discuss when we discuss the politics of the bodies or cultured bodies. Beginning with an examination of the phenomenon of fashion, it gives a clear idea in the modern sense of the term, the adornment of the human body by a variety of methods which we have these days in clothing, makeup, jewelry, accessories, tattooing, scarification, etc. There are several methods to it which expresses fundamental dimensions of cultural identification and social participation of who and what we consider ourselves to be. There are several representations, social representations of the human body. There are several accessories that we use to express the cultural identification. I hope you understand. If I give an example of a thali or a zindur on your forehead, there are several expressions of this cultural identification and the social participational process. The basic pattern involves cultural forms which enjoy a temporary acceptance and respectability only to be replaced by others more abreast of the times. This fashion can be distinguished from custom, which refers to established and fixed norms of belief and conduct. In the traditional societies, where customs are slow to change, fashion was an alien term or a notion. Yet fashion itself has a customary basis. It exemplifies a dual tension. On the one hand, the fashionable individual wants to stand out from the crowd and appear special. On the other hand, by dressing in a certain style, the individual is displaying a kinship with other similarly fashionable persons. The anthropologist Edward Safir neatly refined this idea in stating that fashion is custom in the guise of departure from custom. So fashion is always responsive to what is considered up to the minute. It is a sharp indicator of the so-called spirit of the times, and that reflects the culture of the times, a telling reflection of the here and now. And fashion, of course, is not a phenomenon confined to adornment. It occurs in a wide variety of fields, including architecture, drama, household furnishing, literature, and the theories and methods of the natural and social sciences. There are several celebrated theories attached to it. I don't want to go much deeper into the fashion and the aspects of it. I would like to address uh, a few more things which represent the society through human body. The gender difference and the representations of femininity. Gender is very often considered as a cultural overlay to the anatomically founded differences between the sexes. Sex, as we generally refers to the biological differences between male and female, while gender refers to the culturally specific ways of thinking, acting, and feeling. There is this aspect of femininity and masculinity, which are gender terms referring to the ways of thinking, acting, and feeling considered to be appropriate in a society for male or female. And sometimes the relation between biology and culture is thought of an additive terms. Culture rounds out and amplifies the dimorphism that nature provides, so that a propensity towards care of infants is linked to the biological capacity to breastfeed, which is actually part of the feminine representation of gender. There are paradoxes, the culturally dominant beliefs which are considered to be paradoxes and expectations about women's personal appearance. Some of the notable paradoxes that we see is the modesty paradox. Women are constructed as seduction, ever to be punished for it. There is this duplicity paradox where women are constructed as artifice, then marginalized for lacking essence and authenticity. There is this visibility paradox where women are constructed as a spectacle, yet are culturally invisible. There is this beauty paradox where women embody ugliness while they signify beauty too. There is this death paradox where women signify death as well as the defense against it, giving birth to a child. And female beauty, it is felt, is an ideal state that can be attained by only a few and then for only a short period of the lifespan. And popular awareness of these issues is becoming more and more developed through a variety of actions, including the banning of excessively thin models of from the usually published versions of advertising in the Western countries. And likewise, we have the representation of masculinity too. One element of hegemonic masculinity involves bodily displays of aggression and violence, and this is often regarded as uh, a facilitated one, if not actually caused by male musculature and chromosomal heritage. And studies of the cultural and social dimensions of violent behavior suggest that these biological endowments are at best enabling devices, and that there is a complex cultural context mediating aggressive acts from the interpersonal to the institutionalized, but actual displays of interpersonal violence are often frowned upon. It is the potential for aggressive action that is very critical in this case, a potential that is very often translated into the stance, posture, and muscle tensions of the male body. If we take the case of teenage working class boys, for example, a certain amount of pushing and punching, playfully framed, can function as a signifier of friendship. There are several representations like this. Let me move on to yet another important representation, that is sexuality. The representation of the human body. In particular, the modern representational techniques of photography and film has stimulated a range of debates and the limits of acceptable images of the human being or human body. And these technologies can picture the human body, pleasures, pains, and degradations. And the representation of sexuality has different aspects to it. Some categories of person are required to be particularly skillful in the management of emotions. There is this body arts, there is this sporting body, and in increasingly sedentary contemporary societies, we have the sporting activities, whether undertaken professionally or recreationally, are a major form of physical engagement in the world, especially for men. The disciplining that practice and training in a sport involves can be regarded in the Foucauldian terms as producing docile bodies. You can consider the factors of Jallikattu from this point of view. From a cultural context, from a contemporary cultural context, even though considered to be a sporting activity that forms part of a cultural phenomenon. Boxers, like dancers, strongly identify with their bodies. Wrestlers, they identify with their bodies. They are their bodies, and they clearly see their skill at using their bodies for the purposes, and they consider it as an asset that can be translated into the worldly success. The film artists, they also consider their body to be perfect, and bodily labor is undertaken by a fighter who is an untrained novice, has a certain height and weight, facial shape and skin tone, all of which are noticed by the trainer in assessing the potential of a boxer. And these characteristics define but not determine the likely future of the boxer. There is this gymnasium trainers who give training. The training is physically demanding, often requiring an exacting routine of early morning runs and strenuous workouts that make a social life difficult. But in order to have acceptance in the society, you need to do all these things. And the body arts are also of the same kind. The body is often discussed as a cultural representation of social organization. In the anthropological tradition, the divisions of the body are used to make moral distinctions between good and bad. For example, we have left-handedness represents things that are sinister. Research on tattooing shows how the skin is both a physical and cultural boundary in which tattoos are markers of inclusion and exclusion. And the body is always central to our being in the world. Sociologists in the past have studied how the body enters into a political discourse as a representation of power and how power is exercised over body. And as we listened, following Foucault, historical research has shown how representations of the body are the result of relations of power, particularly between men and women. And the body, as I said, is central to our being in the world. And the perception cannot be treated as a disembodied consciousness. Research inspired by this idea of the lived body and lived experiences has been important in demonstrating the intimate connections between body, experience, and identity. We usually say this kind of a demonstration of the intimate connections. Only a person who experiences an identity will be able to comprehend the pain and the pleasure of that identity. The body is invested with symbolic capital, whereby it is a corporeal expression of the hierarchies of social power. And the body is permanently cultivated and represented by the aesthetic preferences of different social classes. Research on the body is confronted by two different options. There is either the cultural decoding of the body as a system of meaning that has a definite structure existing separately from the intentions and conceptions of individuals, or there is the phenomenological study of embodiment that attempts to understand the human practices that are organized around the life course, which, for example, the birth, maturation, reproduction, and the death cycle. I would also like to mention the work of Pierre Bourdieu, who offers a possible solution to this persistent tension between meaning and experience, or between representation and practice. One major work that I came across while I was reading for preparing for this session was Pierre Bourdieu's Outline of a Theory of Practice, which was published in the year 1977. Bourdieu's development of the notions of habitus and practice in Outline of a Theory of Practice provides a research strategies for looking simultaneously at how status difference is inscribed on the body and how we experience the world through our bodies, which are ranked in terms of their cultural capital. And this reconciliation of these traditions can be assisted by distinguishing between the idea of the body as representation and embodiment as practice and experience. The creative tension between seeing the body as a cultural representation and experience will continue to produce innovative and creative research. There are, of course, new issues on the horizon which the sociologists or theorists will need to examine. The post-human body, the cybernetics, genetic modification, and the genetic mapping of the body are certain obvious issues which we could come across. And that is the final point which I would like to stress today. The challenges to the conventional conceptions of human embodiment. When we consider the challenges to the conventional beliefs system, we have a lot of examples like the cyborgism, the fragmentation and the end of the body concepts. We have the distinction between humans and the animals. We have a cyborg notion which refers not to the Frankenstein figures or swimmers or runners built on steroids and hormones, but to the hybrid networks that arise from the incorporation of humans into technologies designed to facilitate human projects. The enormous impact of technoscience, the domination of the informatics on the home, the market, the workplace, the school and the hospital offers the potential to override the old determinations of class, race, and gender and establish new modes of human being. In the postmodern world, identities, relationships, and categories are no more significant. Transformation and reconstruction increasingly center on the emergent social relations of science and technology. And when we look at the concept of body in the postmodern sense, the postmodern body whose materiality is mediated in culture and discourses, it is basically a political one. And many postmodernists transform the material body into an inscribed text, or rather, they view the body as a text and pit it against the language. The postmodern body is also a fluid and transgressive one that exists between the textual and the material, the organic and the virtual. It loses its fixed boundaries and unified meaning and becomes a site for conflicting meanings and positions. In the case of postmodernists, they celebrate the dissolution of the subject in language and the transformation of the world into a text. Body is transformed into a text. It is thus textualized or culturally constructed and is seen as a carrier of cultural and political inscription and attributes. Thus, the material body is often entangled with discourses rooted in social, cultural, and political codes. The physical body becomes richly metaphorical in a postmodern context, and it becomes a discursive site for multiple significations that textualize it and constantly put its embodiment question. The body is directly involved in a political field, and power relations have an immediate hold upon it. And it can be analyzed as a historically and culturally specific entity, one which is viewed, treated, and experienced differently depending on the social context and historical period. The materiality of the body is inseparable from the power relations and historical forces, and it complicates the relationship between the body and its discursive formations. It is inscribed by political power structures and its discursive practices. It is always subject to change and is always experienced as mediated through its different social constructions. And postmodern theories argue that there are no substances or ideas outside language. And language organizes the body according to the beliefs of a particular culture. Thus, the human body is a flexible concept which can be interpreted in diverse ways depending on time, place, and context. They can be seen as enigmatic text to be decoded. The body proves to be a surface for the inscription of historical events and a metaphor for power relations. It is at once singular and metaphorical, a reality and a fabrication, and a biologically given and a regulatory field. It is mediated by language through metaphors and is a site for inscription by discursive power practices. Let me recapitulate my discussion, the major points which I was trying to address, the five broad aspects of the cultural shaping of human bodies. First, I was trying to address the social construction of the human body. Then I moved on to the cultural understanding of the body. From there, we looked at the cultural regulation and the restraint of the human body. Then we looked at the social representations of the human body. And then we also addressed the challenges to the conventional conceptions of human embodiment. When we address the conceptual, the conventional conceptions, when we say that the conventional conceptions are being challenged. We should also look at the commercialization of the body these days, the subjective uh, level or the personal level of a body that has turned to objective and impersonal or a public space. We see the six pack these days, the bodybuilding or the beauty pageants or the massage parlors. The modern medicine itself is a wonderful example for the commercialization of body. The organ transplantation that we see in the modern times, these things are actually challenging the conventional notions of body. Identifying oneself from the other leads to the formation of an identity. And this identity is created through an othering process. And that is constituted by a biological system. And this biological system is largely constructed by the social or the environmental situations. I would like to stop with giving you a wonderful idea, which I consider whenever I think about this identity and the body. The image that comes to my mind is that of the colonies or the slums in the suburbans of the metros. The bodies that they express, the time and the expression of an individual in the slum is different from the expression of the same person in a different time and a different space, in the same body in a different attire, in a different time and a different space. And I'm much thankful to the organizers of this 5-day faculty development program for giving me a chance to address this elite gathering, intellectual gathering. And I hope I've given a brief idea about the cultured bodies, how human body becomes a site of social representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was an interesting, informative session. Thank you so much. I request the audience to post your questions if you have any to speak. You can post your questions in the chat box. I request the audience to post if you have any questions in the chat. Sir, there is a question for you. You can see the question in your voice. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I can read
Yes,
that.
sir,
Can I answer that? Yeah, correlation between human body and culture. Definitely, that was what I was trying to address. There is this comparison of human body with culture. Body is always constantly constructed by culture. Culture as part of the social continuum, social representation that very often creates and in times that recreates the identity of a human body. That is what I stopped with. I gave an example. In the time and space, one single body is represented in two different aspects. I gave the example of a person from a slum. When the expression of an individual in the slum is different from his expression in the metro space. This is the same body, but in two different cultural scenarios. And the time and space matters in this. It is not actually a comparison. It is a correlation actually. The second part of your question says that the correlation between human body and culture. It is not a comparison to be very precise. It is a correlation. It works together in different time frame and different spatial situations, and that is how human body enacts in culture, and the culture also frames the human body to its meanings. How to handle feminine subversiveness. Uh, I'm not actually an expert in answering that particular question on handling the feminine subversiveness, because this is an age-old question that we have been discussing right from the uh, beginning of the feminine thought process. See, we have to move out of this concept of feminine subversiveness, because there is yet another group which is much more sidelined or marginalized in the society, which I just gave a passive discussion of the transsexuals. More than the uh, male, female or the male subversiveness. It is more of the transsexual subversiveness that is the need of the hour, and we need to discuss more about how to handle the transsexuals or the transgenders, transgender community in the society. They have a lot of problems in the days today, and the definitions of the social construct of the society, that is not actually giving a very clear-cut idea about how to define or how to construct the transgender community into the mainstream society. We are yet to accept that particular point, and I don't think I'm given a very clear idea to your question on female subversiveness, but that point has to move on to a different level. Uh, there's yet another question. How do we map the concerns of disability studies in the context of studies on the body? Excellent question. I forgot to address this point on disability studies. See, though I've presented it as a contradictory categorization of able bodies and disabled bodies. In the context of the studies on body, the concern of disability studies have come up in the recent years. There are a lot, and it is definitely a possibility for studying the body from a disability studies context. That is definitely as I said, in the case of transgenders, this disability studies is also very equally important in the case of the studies on body.
Sir, there is the next question.
I think I've addressed that question.
Yes.
Concerns of disability studies. Okay, do you think body as a text should be inferred and interpreted from a postmodernism perspective? Is body be treated as subordinate to culture? Uh, Definitely. I think as a text should be, see, we don't need to, because it is in the postmodernistic perspective, body has already been transformed into a text. It is considered to be a text. It has been for a few years. Body has been considered to be a text in the postmodernist perspective, and it cannot be considered as subordinate to culture. It is a continuum which is parallel. It works both ways. Uh, it constitutes each other. The body constitutes the culture, and the culture also helps in creating the body. It's continuum. You cannot pit one against the other. It is a parallel working. It goes together. That is how it functions.
Thank you, sir. We have received lots of positive feedback over here, sir.
Thank you for the session, sir. May I request Dr. Sridevi to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, members of here. On behalf of the Department of English and other foreign languages, I'm here to propose the vote of thanks for today's session. First of all, we wish to record our sincere gratitude to Srm-Ist for giving us an opportunity to organize this 5-day international FDP. We extend our sincere thanks to our honorable resource person who has presented such a wonderful presentation for us. Thank you very much for spending your valuable time with us, sir. We extend our special thanks to our director, dean, VP academic, and VP admin for providing constant encouragement and support. We are very thankful to our HOD, Dr. V. Rama, for guiding us in a right way to make this activity a successful required. A special thanks to you, ma'am. We place our hearty congratulations to all our participants for their active participation in the second day of this faculty development program. As no program can become successful with just a single person speaker, I extend my special thanks to my team, colleagues, and all volunteers for their support. Thank you all for making this event a memorable one. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request all the participants to fill the feedback. The feedback will be posted now. Request all the participants to fill the feedback. Thank you, sir. Thank you. எடுக்கல திருப்பி வர சொல்றேன் ஃபீட்பேக் மட்டும் போட்டுட்டு திருப்பி நீ ஃபோன் பண்ணி வர சொன்னேன் லைன்ல ஃபீட்பேக் எடுத்துரும் அவனே எடுத்துருவான்
சரி ஆக்சுவலி ஸ்கிரீன்ல வரல ஆனா வந்து